30 years after the Yugoslav wars, the IIP asked experts about how they perceive the reconciliation process and what in their opinion is the biggest success story. This is what they said.
Well, I think the story of reconciliation is not a very encouraging one in the Western Balkans because, in fact, the nationalist narratives are still prevailing in schools and in the media across the region. So overall progress has been very limited. The biggest success story in my mind is the fact that the number of victims has been documented beyond dispute, and the main events have been documented by courts, in particular the ICTY. So while some politicians still deny it, it is basically a fact which is very hard to deny without ignoring the very ample evidence we have.
Difficult to answer. I think there were some efforts, but mainly driven from outside. A lot of foundations, think tanks and so on tried to encourage reconciliation. In the countries themselves, I think the efforts and the results are at minimum.
One thing I think everybody can learn from the Western Balkans and from our whole experience is that reconciliation is not an event. It's not even a process that has its beginning and its end. I would say that it's a way of life. It has to become a way of life.
Frankly, I think that it didn't happen, and I'm sorry if you think I'm too dark, but I don't think we have really reconciled. And of course, it is a success that we can travel and enjoy holidays in neighboring countries. We can. Sometimes there are incidents, but in general, it is a pleasant holiday if you go in any of the countries around.
I would say that in the past 30 years, we've managed to get a very solid basis for the reconciliation in the region. And in particular there, I think as the biggest success of the process, I would say the amount of information, testimonies, evidences that the ICTY in The Hague, but also local courts across the region have gathered when it comes to the crimes committed during the 1990s wars.
I perceive it as a failed process, and that's because 30 years after, we are still having major issues talking about the past, talking to each other about the past, and listening to others' stories about the past and what happened during the wars in the 90s.
Well, it's in general not a really big success. Reconciliation is still a very evasive concept in the Balkans, and everything that has happened from the outside has not really produced tangible results.
Yeah, we tend to focus on the negative sides, but I think there's actually there's been quite a few success stories in the region. The fact that we didn't have escalations of conflict are, I think, the biggest success in itself.
Well, it is difficult to determine what actually the reconciliation process is in order to be able to assess it. However, if we agree that reconciliation is a long-term, complex and multi-layered process by which deeply divided societies recover the ability to function normally and effectively after violence, then it has not been smooth nor unilateral in the Western Balkans. There are small success stories, but not a big one.
The biggest success story, in my view, is the fact that we are now discussing reconciliation. I've been working on this for over 2 decades, and I can assure you that this topic was not as central as it is now in our discussions. So that is one of the biggest successes.
As a young person from the Balkans and from Serbia, I would say that the reconciliation between the people of the former Yugoslav states happened in a quite good way until now. There are many setbacks, but I would say that the biggest success story of the reconciliation is that we can all freely travel into the other countries and that we can enjoy good time and having also fun with the people and meeting new friends and new people in those countries.
The reconciliation is unfortunately not in the best shape. We still refer a lot to wars. We still tend to forget. We still tend to neglect. There is even revisionism going on in some parts of the region. So basically there is a still long way to go in order to reconcile the past and the present. But on the positive side, there is a certain underlying notion of normality or commonness among the people. For example, at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, there was a lot of solidarity. When the floods hit the region, 2014, the regions and the nations showed solidarity. When there was an earthquake in Tirana, there was a lot of regional solidarity. So basically, there is something common and human that cannot be killed through bad policies, through nationalism, but there is still a long way to go to make the normal become the normal for all the region and for all the states.
I think, yes, there is progress, especially among the younger generation, but at the same time, we also see backlashes in several areas. For me, if I have to mention one success story, one that I got to know also personally, was initiative which OSCE in Serbia and Kosovo started for female parliamentarians and also other women to meet and to have a process of overcoming the images of the past, the images and the sort of whatever they knew or not knew about each other.
Well, I think we have some up and downs in the reconciliation process. Unfortunately, also in the last month, there are some impediments and some disturbances. Well, the biggest success story in the end is, of course, Northern Macedonia, where you have an internal reconciliation between the Macedonians and the Albanians from Macedonia, but also with Greece.
I believe it resulted in rather neurotic societies that still cannot deal with the past and cannot accept what happened concerning the war crimes, loss of territories, etc. However, when it comes to the biggest success story, what I see is very important strength in our societies is that conflict resulted then in a strong anti-war movement that is still active in post-Yugoslav space.